What's up, y'all? Hope everybody's well. Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. This is a piece we're going to look at today. Kind of deals with the other side of the issue regarding Asian hate. It's a side that doesn't really make the news, especially as it pertains to the relationship between Black and Asian communities. We've seen over the last few years an aggression toward African Americans by some Asian communities, both women and men. And yet, none of the issues that Black males or Black folk have suffered have garnered any kind of policy response. But somehow, in certain circles, Black folk became the face of Asian hate, which was an interesting dynamic. And much of what's going on now is in relation to COVID, so there's a tie to this. It's not just coming out of nowhere. Yet and still, the victimization that various Black folk have suffered over the years has not been really brought to light. This is a particular story that caught me a little bit. Thought I would talk about it. This is coming from AtlantaBlackStar.com. Let's see here. It's up on the screen for you. Yeah. Right. It's entitled, "He Got a Bond So Low for Trying to Kill My Kid. Black Father Angry, Baffled After Asian Neighbor Accused of Shooting His 6-year-old is Released. Prosecutor Appeals." Right. Get into this here. All right. So it reads, a suburban Detroit father is irate after the man suspected of shooting his 6-year-old son through the front window of his home as the child retrieved his bike from the neighbor's yard was released after a judge gave him a $10,000 bond. Arnold Daniels said his 6-year-old son Kobe doesn't fully comprehend what kind of danger he was truly in as he played outside his home on Candlewood Lane in the Ypsilanti Township. I don't know how to pronounce that. In Michigan on Saturday, June 5th. Right now, he's not even processing what happened. He doesn't realize how close he came to not being here, but I realize it, Daniel said. On Saturday, Kobe and his siblings were riding bikes outside their home when Kobe left his bike in the neighbor's yard. The neighbor, identified as 29-year-old Ryan Le-Nguyen, I guess, came out of his home as Kobe retrieved his bike and threatened the boy with a sledgehammer, witnesses said. According to Daniel, Le-Nguyen said something to his son, and Kobe replied, although he's not sure what he said, tried hitting me with a sledgehammer, but that's not going to work because I'm too fast, Kobe told Fox 2. Police say Le-Nguyen went back inside his home and shot a gun through the front window, striking Kobe in the arm. Footage of the incident captured on a Ring camera shows a gunshot ring out before Kobe screams. What? Another boy asked him. He shot me, Kobe yelled. He's bleeding, he got shot, the older boy said, calling the expletive police. So I guess that's what he said. Kobe was taken to a hospital where a doctor said the bullet, which entered and exited through his right arm, would have likely killed him if it struck an inch to either side. He is now recovering at home. On social media, Fox 2 reporter was criticized for asking Kobe, did it hurt? Right? As she spoke to him about the incident, and Kobe, of course, said yes. I know she didn't ask him, did it hurt? A particular user wrote in the comment section of an Instagram post about the incident. And so they kind of go back and forth about that. And at some point they ask if the reporter is dumb. She just asked the child if a gunshot hurt. Rubbing me the wrong way. That's a child. Don't look at our kids like they're so tough that you're insensitive and dehumanized, like we don't feel pain. Daniel said they'd had problems with Le-Nguyen before, and that he once tried to throw away one of his children's bikes. He believes Le-Nguyen was upset that the bike was in his yard on the day of the shooting. Nguyen was arrested by the county sheriff and was charged with assault with intent to murder. On Tuesday, he was released after posting bond, which a judge set to $10,000. The prosecutor's office said they requested $100,000 bond. Eli Savitt added in a Facebook post last Tuesday evening that they filed an emergency motion seeking to cancel Le-Nguyen's bond. We share in the community. We share in the community's pain and anger from a child being shot, as we know that for many, the pain and anger is compounded by the fact that the defendant was able to make his bond as set by the court. To be clear, our office recommended significantly more restrictive bond conditions, and we disagree with the bond decision that was handed down by the court. That is why on Tuesday afternoon, we filed for an emergency motion to cancel the defendant's bond and for his bond to be reconsidered. See, Daniel said, I'm trying to figure out, he got a bond so low for trying to kill my kid. Le-Nguyen was ordered not to return home, but Daniel said that that's not enough, and that he fears for his family's safety. He said, I don't know what he's capable of. I'm irate, really. I can't function. An emergency motion to raise bond has been filed. Well, let me see. This is interesting to me. I think, for the most part, that the frustration around this issue of pain, which the article tries to center on, is a bit of a deflection from dealing with the racial connotations of the event. Now, it's not irrelevant. The issue itself is not irrelevant in terms of this whole question of Black folk and feeling pain. There is actually documentation around that is justified in being looked at. I just think that in this particular instance, it's being used to deflect on the racial tensions between Black and Asian communities right now. And a lot of that has hit the foreground recently when President Biden stepped in on behalf of Asians and even, signed some policy in their interest. And despite how much has been happening in the Black community, there's been no such response, more particularly since Black folk and Black women in particular are being credited with having gotten him into office. And the response of gratitude is nothing, which many of us knew would pretty much happen. And it's pretty much a Democratic staple at this point, or a Democrat staple. But nevertheless, there is a bit of a deflection, I think, going on in this article to kind of tamp down the potential, raising the tensions between both communities, right? And again, a lot of this has to do with very public assaults on Blacks by Asians that haven't really been taken seriously. But, nevertheless, it's going. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about this issue of pain. I want to put this, on your radar if it's not something you're familiar with. Right? This is a piece. Shout out to my boy, OK Shango. He shot me this one and it saved me a little bit of time. I was going to pull something similar up, but I decided to go with the one he sent me. This you can find on the NCBI site entitled Racial Bias and Pain Assessment and Treatment Recommendations and False Beliefs about Biological Differences Between Blacks and Whites. This is written by Hoffman, Trewalter, Axt, and Oliver. Right? And I'll just read through what you should be able to see. Maybe I'll enlarge it a bit. That helps. So the abstract reads, Black Americans are systemically undertreated for pain relative to white Americans. We examine whether this racial bias is related to false beliefs about biological differences between Blacks and whites, e.g., or for example, Black people's skin is thicker than whites. Study 1 documented these beliefs among white laypersons and revealed that participants who more strongly endorsed false beliefs about biological differences reported lower pain ratings for Blacks versus white targets. Study 2 extended these findings to the medical context and found that half of a sample of white medical students and residents endorsed these beliefs. Moreover, participants who endorsed these beliefs rated the Black versus white patient's pain as lower and made less accurate treatment recommendations. Participants who did not endorse these beliefs rated the Black versus white patient's pain as higher, but showed no bias in treatment recommendations. These findings suggest that individuals with at least some medical training hold and may use false beliefs about biological differences between Blacks and whites to inform medical judgments, which may contribute to racial disparities in pain assessment and treatment. Now, I've had some experience with this, both personally and in terms of my wife, who many of you know, I've told you before, had sickle cell. So we would go to the hospital and she'd be in extreme amounts of pain. And there would often be a very, kind of casual dismissal of that pain, of course, alongside racial accusations that we were only there to cop drugs. right? I've had doctors ask me if I'm threatening her to pretend to be in pain so that I could get drugs through her, or if she was, faking it to get pain drugs. And, this was a woman who was born with sickle cell and been in and out of the hospital her entire life, right? And it would often take calling other doctors, sometimes out of state, just to provide a doctor evidence that this is an ongoing condition, right? Which, of course, when you do all of that, the pain continues to go up, and the longer it takes to make all those calls and get the doctor you have to believe you, she's suffering that much more. That was actually what ended up kind of happening just before she died. By the time the doctors believed her pain level was so high that the traditional, pain meds they do eventually give you when they believe you didn't work. It was kind of like throwing a baseball at a moving train at that point. They had to put her into a coma, just to kind of monitor that, and she never woke up. So anyway, these are the kind of issues that tend to go on, and they affect Black folk particularly hard. And there were reports, I think I did one last year, of a young man who went to the emergency room, and the nurse white female nurse was being real gruff with him. I think he had broken his leg or something like that, and she was just real oblivious to it. My suspicion is that a lot of this has to do with perceptions of sameness and perceptions of humanity, meaning that whites, by and large, see other whites and recognize their humanity. And, don't necessarily see that with Black folk, especially if they've not been raised around any or don't have any significant relationships. At the end of the day, you identify with people you're familiar with. You recognize their pain, you recognize their humanity, so on and so forth. But I think it's the human element that's the core of this. And I think even in situations where we talk about, like, say, teaching, it plays a role. I think when we look at grading practices, when we find that, if you have white teachers, there may be a racial element in how the gradings take place. We definitely know that in terms of gender, girls dealing with women teachers tend to perform better. Boys dealing with male teachers tend to perform better. There may be an identification on the other end in terms of the teacher and their grading in response to people they recognize as human. I've actually seen this take place on the elementary school level, where in a classroom, kids who act up, the teacher will see those that she doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of experience with as acting up more quickly, especially if they're Black, more quickly than those of her own race. This is with white teachers I noticed here in Fresno. That kind of thing tends to happen. And I think it also plays out in terms of grading and academic performance. Who we identify with changes our entire worldview. And my suspicion is that applies to a lot of different contexts, but in this instance, pain. So it's a relevant issue. But again, as I suspect, there's also an attempt to deflect from the racial elements of the story. And I think that needs to be taken into account, because at the end of the day, there have been tensions for decades between Asian and Black communities. We can go back to the 1992 uprisings in LA, right, in response to Rodney King. But with that, there were tensions with, Korean Americans living and working in Black areas, having small stores and gas stations, so on and so forth. So there have been tensions going back, right? Tensions going back for quite a while. And there have been responses by Blacks and Asians in very direct ways. But, again, despite what's happening in the Black community, very limited amounts of policy to advocate for them, most particularly in regard to Black males. Anyway, y'all keep it going. Take it easy. Talk to you soon. Peace.